My workplace is an experience type of business. There are retail locations in and out. I sometimes work in the retail portions. Workers generally show up an hour before we open. My shift was to come in right as we opened. As I'm walking with other crew members, I see nothing is opened as it should. Walk into the first location in the main area and see my manager standing in 4 inches of water telling me we are opening late. A pipe burst. This happened literally 5 minutes before my arrival, 5 minutes before we were set to open to the waiting public. The managers and supervisors were in charge of repairs and whatnot, while us crew went to mingle in the back to wait for orders. We are all on our phones and we read the comments and reviews of our workplace regularly because it's hilarious the things people come up with for insults and complaints. 10 minutes after our workplace posted about the delayed opening due to a pipe burst, there were half a dozen complaints about how unprepared we were and how inconvenient it was for them to wait all this time without warning. How we really need to do better and think about the customers and plan these things. You know, because we totally planned our pipe to burst 5 minutes before opening. Let me just reschedule the weather for you. Bonus fact, the pipe was fixed and water cleaned up in about an hour and we were ready to open. It took us about 15 to get to our stations and prep for opening. When another pipe in a different location decided to take its turn to go. So, a bit of context, my store is a well-known chain store and I work as the cashier, which includes the self-checkout. Anyway, this story comes from a couple of days ago. So, I'm working the SCO area, and as I'm making my way towards the waiting line, I overhear 3 customers arguing with each other. I walk over and ask if there's a problem. From what I gathered, one of the customers, an Instacart shopper, tried to cut the line, and the 2 other customers were calling her out for it. When I asked them if there was a problem, they said the issue was resolved, though Instacart lady was pissed. I said okay then and went back to my duties. A couple of minutes later, I have to go help Instacart lady with an ID check on alcohol. As I'm helping her with this, she says that was uncool, letting me get bowled like that. I asked her to clarify, because I thought surely I wasn't hearing this right. She continues, you let me get bullied by 2 other customers. Okay. I guess I did hear that right. I told this lady what exactly did she want me to do. You should have stood there and listened. Right, you want me to stand there and listen to you having a petty argument with 2 other grown adults when I have better things to do. Sure. Anyway, I told her that it's not my job to resolve customer disputes. She said that's fine, because I have everyone's names and I'm going to report you. I told her okay then, but again, it's not my job. Whatever, she snarls, and she walks out with the stuff. I shrugged, and went back to work. TL, doctor, lady confused me, a cashier, for a daycare worker over a petty argument. When I worked at a hardware store, I occasionally had to spot for people who had to grab pallets of products with a lift. Of course, when we do that we would need to close 2 aisles, one being where the product is, the other being the adjacent one, where in the event of something being pushed or pulled by accident when grabbing a overhead product, no one gets hurt or injured from something falling. Obviously we don't want customers passing or opening the gates because we want customers to be safe. Unfortunately some dinguses didn't think that rule applies to them and thought to be untouchable. A co-worker in a forklift and I were in the tile aisle helping an older couple, sweet people, get some tile, and it turned out the remaining tile they needed was on the overhead. So as my CW got the lift in position, I went to close the other aisle to the right, our carpeting, and see a group of 6 people looking at roll-away carpet. Naturally we can't close an aisle when there are people still shopping, so I asked if they needed help and let them know we were going to be closing the aisle soon. They proceed to stay in that aisle for 10 minutes not just looking at the rolled carpet, which mind you we only had 5 different kinds with varying colors and cuts on display, so there wasn't much to choose from, and talking about God knows what. The older lady needing the tile realized they were holding up the aisle and was waiting at the other end of the aisle looking at them with her arms crossed. Even though she was wearing shades I could tell she was staring daggers at them. Finally, what seemed like an eternity, the group leaves and I rush to get both gates closed and latched to the shelves. My CW was bringing the pallet of tile down as I was watching the gates on the carpeting side. As I was looking at other aisles to see if anyone was looking into our flooring aisle and if I had to tell customers we will be opening it shortly, I turned to see two guys, early 20s, from the group before on the other side unlatch the gate opposite of me. Open it, and proceed to walk in the middle of the aisle. I quickly called for the forklift to stop and I called out to the guys. Hey! This aisle is blocked off right now. We are getting a pallet down that could push something over here. One of the Einsteins looked at me and said, "We are just getting some tape." Tape. You guys risked having a heavy pallet avalanche turn you guys to human pancakes. For freaking tape? You couldn't just wait 2 minutes max? I stood there dumbfounded at how impatient and stupid they were. By the time I got out of it they had left and closed the gate back. I told my CW and my floor manager what happened and they were just less than amused as I was. Moral of the story: don't open closed, do not pass or hazardous gates or signs. Odds are there is a good reason you're being kept on the opposite side. TL, drive. Impatient dummies open a closed gate at the risk of heavy hardware falling just to get floor tape. For backstory, I work in a grocery store. For our store there's always 2 people at the service desk, watching over the registers, being a place customers can go to for help, etc. We also sell our cigarettes and other nicotine products from behind the counter. People involved: me, customer, and colleague. It was around 5 p.m., and a lady walks up to the service desk. My colleague, working the register, greeted the customer and asked how she could help. The customer asked if we had found any cigarettes. She supposedly left them behind 3 days before. My colleague immediately said no. The lady got a little agitated and said, "You didn't even look." My colleague answered that we would have known of any left behind items, because it always gets shared in the group chat. The lady wouldn't take no for an answer and yelled at my colleague to go look. My colleague, not trying to get into trouble, walked to the back and pretended to look. She came back, said, "Sorry ma'am, we don't have any left behind cigarettes." At this point my colleague looks at me, and I walk over. "What's the problem ma'am?" I ask. "She won't give me my cigarettes." She literally screamed. Meanwhile I, who was working on the computer 4 meters away, heard everything. I said, "Ma'am, we haven't found any cigarettes. We're sorry." The woman walks away, and I thought that was the end of it, so I walked back to my computer. 3 minutes later, the lady walks back into the store. Walks up to my colleague and yelled at her to give her the cigarettes, that didn't exist. My colleague tells the woman that she's done with the conversation, and asks her to leave. The customer opens the little gate to the back off the service desk, and walks to the storage, where we keep thousands of euros worth of cigarettes, and she grabs a big packet, 10 packs in foil. Then she tries to walk out. I block the way out of the service desk, whilst my colleague called the police. The lady told me every swear word on the planet. As my colleague walks to us, she got off the phone, "Police on the way." And she told the lady this. The lady, hearing the word police, leaps at my dear colleague and pulls her hair. I get over there and try to pull the lady off her. Then, the lady spit on my colleague. As she does this, police walks in and immediately run over to retain her. My poor colleague got yelled at even more, before police took her away. The police, coming back with all her information about an hour later, asked if my colleague would have liked to press charges, but she denied, not wanting to go through all the trouble. Sorry if the spelling was bad, I'm not English. Thank you for reading. When I first started in retail, we had a location that sat over a border between towns. The driveway and entrance was in A, but about 1/4 of the store, and the majority of the parking lot, was in B. The company was able to get a liquor license for beer, wine from B, but not A. They had a pretty ingenious solution to this problem. They changed the layout to put the liquor department and service desk on the B side. They installed an extra register in the desk for liquor sales only. No other register could process liquor sales. Customers brought their beer, wine to that lane. It was bagged in paper, the bag was stapled shut with the receipt attached, and then handed back to the customer so they could continue their shopping. I was working as a night manager in a supermarket. In the same building was a liquor store. Technically we are owned by the same company, but we are still different businesses. We have no say in them nor they in us. I got called to the service desk because a lady was demanding to speak to the manager. I come down and immediately notice she is pissed. I ask if I can help. She tells me I must go into the liquor store and force them to serve her. I told her it was a different store, I wasn't their manager and I could not do that. She said we are the same building. I said yes, but not every store in a shopping center can control what other stores do. She started getting even angrier, told me she was going to call head office. I told her I'd give her the number. She then told me if I didn't go in there and force him to serve her she would call the police. I told her go ahead, there is nothing at all I can do. She stormed out, abusing both stores. I went into the liquor store to ask what happened. She had been standing at the counter and two young girls, about 16, walked up to the counter, put some alcohol on it and told her mother this is what we want. The staff member told her he can't sell her alcohol, knowing it was going to an underage drinker. He told he would get fired and possibly fined $5,000 for an individual here. She claimed she could buy it for her daughter because she is her mom. He again told her he wouldn't sell it to her. So she came to yell at me. I'd love to know what she was planning on telling the police. This man won't sell me alcohol to give to my underage daughter and her friend.